And I had a rebirth experience. So the earliest memory I have is walking through this spiritual dimension. I can't explain it in any other way. It was sort of concrete, but it wasn't. So there was a lot of energy, a lot of color, and a lot of almost like clouds around me. The color was sort of bright, like pink and very warm colors, like pink, white. And it was very warm and it was very beautiful there. It was just so beautiful. I mean, I had not a care in the world. I felt at ease. And I remember seeing sort of buildings is what I could describe them in human terms in the background. And what I perceived was that those buildings were training buildings. Those were buildings that souls were kind of training and getting ready for their lifetime on planet Earth. And so they were making their plans for their lifetimes. They were, studying spiritual topics and they were getting ready. So it was almost like a yeah, like a boot camp or like a camp. And I had come from that, and I was what I can only describe as like walking down a path, but it wasn't a path in human terms, okay? It was more like, less concrete. And I was communicating with somebody next to me who was a spiritual mentor. That's how I can describe him. He was like a very highly evolved spiritual being right next to me, and he was floating next to me or walking next to me. He was sort of tall. I remember him sort of having like darker robes on, but very loving being, but not a being that incarnates on planet Earth anymore. It was more of a being that had kind of evolved and was now helping beings like me, get through their karma, get through their life stuff, get through everything. And so we were walking, and the way we were communicating was via our minds. So we were telepathically communicating. And at the same time that he was communicating with me, I was really communicating with, higher consciousness, God, or whatever else. And I was getting spiritual downloads and spiritual sort of truths about who we truly are in our nature at the same time. And so at some point, I remember kind of getting this feeling of like, oh no, now we're getting close. Now it's almost time for me to go. And I was getting very anxious. And when I say it wasn't me as a person. It was more like my essence. I perceived myself as like a ball of energy, almost like a lightful being. That's also how I was kind of saw myself, was just this like lightful cloak around me. Um, and so we were walking, getting very anxious, and I started bargaining with him, and that's how he presented himself as a male. But there was sort of this understanding that, that was just his preference to me. He could be male or female or anything, really. I just perceived him as male. And I was kind of asking him in my mind. I said, do I really have to go? And I had this sort of dread of like, oh man, I've been through this so many times and I know what it's like down there and I know how hard it is down there. And I really don't want to leave this beautiful, just blissful space. Like I just wanted to stay here because it's very restful and very beautiful and up there. I mean, you don't have a care in the world there. And he was like, well, we discussed this many times now. You need to go another time. And I said, well, can this at least be my last time? Like, do I really need to go another time? And he was like, well, it's really up to you. I mean, if you do everything that you've decided to accomplish on planet Earth, then maybe this, he was like, it's probably not going to be your last time, but you could potentially skip over a couple of lifetimes and take a shortcut. And I remember in my essence and in my soul thinking at that time, like, that's what I want to do. I just want to power through this lifetime because I don't want to have to go back there again. And before we knew it, we were at this, what I can only describe as almost like a helicopter hub. So it was round and it was like a vortex and it was swirling in the middle. And I was standing in the edge of it, and I could see and perceive other souls standing with their mentors there as well, who had brought them there too. And it was very clear to me that those souls were born too. I mean, at that time, I didn't have that concept of I'm being born, but it was sort of clear to me that those souls were departing too, and that they had gone there to say goodbye to the spiritual realm. And so I was standing there with him, and I was still bargaining, and I was like, I really don't want to have to go. Can't we do anything? Like, can't I just stay a couple more minutes or what, minute? There was no time, but like, it kind of felt that way. And he said, well, we already discussed that. He started getting a little bit like lovingly, but a little bit, like a father figure, almost like we discussed it. Come on, we know you need to go. And then the last thing before he actually pushed me into the vortex, because he knew I wouldn't have gone otherwise, was just remember that we're always here for you. All you need to do is reach out with your mind to us and remember that we're always here for you. And I said, okay. So he pushed me, and I thought in that moment, that, he pushed me down. Again, he pushed me, and I fell down the vortex. And so it was like the tunnel, but in reverse. So the tunnel that a lot of people see in their near-death experiences is what I fell through, but in reverse, almost like a two-way street. And I remember falling through the tunnel, and it was a sensation of being sucked into darkness and thinking like, I remember this from the times I was dying before. And then there was this point where suddenly I was sucked into this dimension, and I slammed into my body. I remember literally like slamming into my body, taking a breath, and then just thinking, here we go again. And being just completely exhausted. Landing in my body was awful. It was just like this really like harsh, like rough, I mean, I was like literally slammed. It was like I was slammed into a wall. There was a lot of pain. It was cold. It was bright. And it was just, the thought was just, here I go again. Most important thing is to remember that we're coming from divinity, that we're coming from the spot, and we're going back there. Also, the memory of these buildings in the distance was really, really clear to me. It was very clear to me that those were the buildings I came from, where I planned my lifetime, where my other soulmates and soul friends were still staying, and where they had been. It was like a preparation place for life on planet Earth. And so, yeah, 100%. We have a contract here. We have a plan here. Nothing is coincidence. I know that for sure. For me, it was very clear when my mentor said to me, well, you can choose. I mean, if you want to get a lot done in this lifetime, like we discussed, if you get every single thing right, and maybe you do overtime, like those kids that go to school and they do extra classes and extracurricular things, then maybe we can, shortcut it, and you don't have to come back another 2, 3, 4, 500 times, whatever. And I remember back then thinking like, that's what I want to do. I want to power through my life like nothing else. I want to just get it all out, get it all done with. And that's really been my MO in my lifetime, has been, I wanted to grow spiritually. I wanted to really, get clean and clear with all the topics in my life, relationship, money, all of it. And really understand, where I was coming from, where I was going, what this life was all about, and how I could help others.
And they said, no, you have to go back. The mission's not complete. You haven't balanced your life. You're here for the most exciting time to be on Earth. Earth is going through an ascension process, and you're here to be part of it. And I thought, well, there's so many other souls that are on Earth carrying out this mission. I don't need to. I'm just going to grab my PJs and a bowl of popcorn, and I'm going to watch the show from up here. And then they took me through my pre-birth planning so that I could see why all of these things had happened to me in my life. So how some people believe in an afterlife, they showed me my life before coming to Earth. And the way that I perceived it in my mind's eye was that it was like a video game. And there was a man who was guiding me through this process. He was wearing a plaid blazer and a fedora. And I found myself in a grocery store with him. And we had this empty grocery cart, and he said, okay, pick your life. And so I saw all of these, they looked like cereal boxes along the wall, and it had all of these different experiences to have on Earth. So, as a soul, I thought, well, if I'm going to Earth, I'm definitely going to Earth. And I started picking all of these boxes of adversity. I picked that I wanted to be an addict, that I would have drug addict parents, that I would experience sexual trauma as a small child, that I would be in emotionally, physically, and verbally abusive relationships throughout my life. I saw all the situations that I picked where I would be the perpetrator, I would be the abuser in people's storylines. And now I'm downloaded with this awareness. And I see that I've picked all these things, and there's some things in the cart that I haven't gotten to yet in my life, like overcoming and recovery and carrying out my mission and divine soul connections. But I hadn't experienced any of that yet. All that I had experienced was the suffering and the trauma of life. And so now I'm seeing that, I'm no longer a victim to my circumstance. Things have no longer happened to me. They happened for me because on some soul level, I had chosen it for the evolvement of myself. And it felt like 2 tons of bondage was released from my spirit in this moment of being downloaded with this belief. They showed me the moment as when I, as a soul, picked the other souls that I would have these experiences with. So they showed me just as this beautiful orb of light approaching another orb of light and deciding that this would be the person that would abuse me sexually as a small child. They showed me the situations where I picked the soul that, again, I would be the abuser with, and that we had made this contract as souls to carry out these lessons with each other for the evolvement of ourselves. And so this was a beautiful belief to be downloaded with, but I still was I rejected the idea of coming back to Earth. And it felt like I was standing in front of I haven't found better language for it, but for lack of a better term, I was standing in front of a jury. That sounds very condemning. There is no condemnation in eternity, but it felt like this table of people or beings, and they were flipping through this book, and they said, "You're just not finished. You have to go back." And again, I transformed into a small child. I was banging my hands and my feet on the floor. I was crying hysterically, saying, "I will not go back. Please do not make me go back. You guys do not tell us what Earth is actually going to be like. I just can't take anymore. Please don't send me back." And I said, I definitely cannot go back into her. And I could perceive my body outside of myself in this experience. I was in my bathroom. And I said, she's glitched. She needs way too much healing. There's no way that I can handle that. I can't go back into her. And they said, okay, you don't have to go back into her, but you do have to go back. And so we'll show you the baby that you'll be born into. And again, it looked much like a video game. And so they showed me this little 3D avatar, this baby's body. And they showed me everything about her. They showed me her gender, her ethnicity, her adversity, her purpose, the things that she would go through in her life. And I had already gone through just very deep challenges in my life. And this baby had even deeper levels of adversity than myself. And I thought, whoa, there's no way that I can start from zero. And I said, if I have to go back, I guess I'll go back into her.
So just as I'm ready to go back, a creator came to me, and now we're standing up. And he said, before you go, is there anything that you would like to ask of us that you would be able to bring back this information and help share it with others? I remember thinking, oh boy, that's kind of a profound question. I drew a blank. And all of a sudden I saw this little speck of light, and it came zipping around me, and then it went into the tender part just behind my ear, and it lit up that pineal gland inside the center of your brain. And instantly I understood what I needed to ask. And I said, I got it. Okay. I understand that God loves everyone. He loves the rapists, the murderers, the people that do the most heinous things on the planet. How can God still love people that do the worst things on earth? And he goes, oh, that's easy, like this. And he did a swoop of his hand, and immediately I was transported into yet another room. And it was me sitting in a chair, but it was a younger version looking of me, and with a counselor. And so the counselor is sitting there and goes, okay, so what we'll do is we'll go over everything that you've chosen to learn on the other side. The counselor then got up, and out of the vision froze, and she came over and she greeted me and said, hello, this is your memory self that is sitting there, and you are your observer self. Memory self, meet your observer self. Observer self, meet your memory self. And so she then sat down. She said, right then, okay, so let's review. What is it that you're going to learn when you go to Earth? And they started to go through some of the things, like your name is going to be Carrie Louise, and you're going to be born sickly. You're going to have kidney stones for the first 14 years of your life, and you'll be at the age of 3. And my memory self went, woohoo! Oh my gosh, that is awesome. And my observer self, me, that's kind of floating in the room, it went, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, is she actually excited that she's going to be sickly and molested and all of that? Again, the counselor stepped out of the image and came, and everything froze. And she said to me, what your memory self remembers that you have remembered to forget when you came to this side of the veil, right? When you came into Earth, what she remembers is the 5 lessons of life. And that when you apply these 5 lessons to every aspect of your world, everything that you are experiencing, then that is why you're here, to grow yourself spiritually. And so she's excited at these experiences, because each experience is an opportunity to apply the 5 lessons of life. And when you do this, you will grow beyond measure. So counselor goes and sits down again. Now they start going through different aspects. A hologram pops up, and it's an image of my mother and father, and I get to choose my parents. They get to choose me. So we come to an agreement that, would you like to be Carrie's parents on Earth? I remember thinking, yeah, but does the memory self remember my dad's drinking years? Because that was a little difficult, you know, that was pretty tough, because there'd be highs and lows. And so again, the counselor came out and said, your memory self understands why your father has the rage that he did. And she has compassion for that. She forgives, she trusts and has faith that he's going to be the perfect dad. And she unconditionally loves him already. So you both get to practice that when you go to the other side. So we had my parents chosen. And so she goes and sits down. The counselor goes and sits down again. And all of a sudden, the room fills up with 12 beautiful radiant beings that come in, and they stand behind the counselor. So the counselor introduced me to my soul pack. And she says, this is your soul pack. Everyone has a soul pack. And you travel with these souls throughout all of your lifetimes, all of your journeys. And that's why when you meet them on Earth, you recognize them, you know them instantly, right? She then says, so which 2 of you, the soul pack of the 12, which 2 of you would like to be Carrie's molesters? And that's when I went, okay, no, I can't do this anymore. And the counselor kind of shushed me and went, would you please just watch and trust, right? And so I sat, you know, I kind of just sat back and thought, okay, I don't know about this. So those 2 that volunteered, they lifted up, and all of a sudden they went zooming to Earth. We all watched them, like we could feel them enter into the wombs of their mothers, their prospective mothers. And you could feel the pain and the sorrow that was surrounding, you know, the alcoholism, the fetal alcohol syndrome in him, and, you know, all the abuse that was around them. You could hear the screaming, and it was just a hell of a beginning for both of them. And they really had a very difficult life, both. We watched as they grew up. Basically, just before I was about to be, everything froze. And I remember turning to the counselor, because we're all watching it, all 12 of us, and the counselor and my memory self and myself. It felt like real time, but it's sped up. And so when everything froze, I turned to the counselor and went, wait, I only remember up to a certain point, and I don't remember past that point. So I need to know what happened, right? I only remember up to that certain point. And so the counselor said, the memory will come to you when it's meant to. But for now, we want to focus on the 5 lessons of life. We want you to focus on the fact that your molesters, the people that hurt you, were actually your best friends in heaven. So the people that hurt you the most are actually your best friends. They volunteered to have a hell of a life, to experience one heck of a life, in order to give you the opportunity to practice the 5 lessons of life of forgiveness, compassion, faith, and trust, and unconditional love, not only towards them, but towards yourself as well. To have unconditional love for yourself, to have faith that you were on the right track and everything happened for a reason, and to have trust that God has a greater plan in all of this, and to have compassion for yourself and forgiveness, not only for them, but for yourself as well. It's all
planned in a sense. We have the ability to pre-choose events in our lives. So it's almost like we have a meeting with the higher ups, and it's like, well, what do I want to achieve in this life? What do I want to experience? Because there's a difference between knowing something, just say you've read it. So you can maybe understand by reading it how to make a pot of tea, but there's a difference just knowing how to do it because you've read about it and actually doing it. So the physical nature of making that tea, warming the pot, pouring it over the tea, letting the tea brew, having the aromas, that's the experience. So that's like life. So the knowing that we are, which is the greater part of ourselves, knows everything, but we are the experience of that knowing. So even if it's not a nice circumstance that we're going through, that we're experiencing physically, that's something that from our higher self perspective, that's also useful. It's like everything is love, even if the dark and the light's love, or it's just contrast. We're spirits having a human experience, and again, it goes back to the just the idea of me having this glass of water. I can tell you what it's like to have a glass of water, but until you've actually done it and held it and looked at it, oh, it's cold, and what does cold feel like until you experience it, and what does it taste like? What does water feel like in your mouth, and does the water have flavor? That's kind of why as spiritual beings we have physical experiences, because it's one thing knowing about something, but it's a different thing to experience it. Knowing that holding someone's hand that you are fond with or in love with, someone can tell you how that feels, but it's not until you feel it yourself. Falling in love, that you don't know how that feels until you stood in front of that person and looking into their eyes and just have this experience of what that feels like. No one can tell you how that feels. You can't read it in a book. And from a spiritual perspective, it's the reason why we have these human bodies, is because we want those human contacts, for good, bad, or indifferent. I've got a number of friends who've had near-death experiences who've actually had the experience of having a pre-birth experience and choosing what they wanted to do, who they wanted to be, and who in their soul group was going to be who in their life. So if we have a soul group, then the soul group, the mother that you have in this life, the energy, the energy of my mother in this life may well have been my child in another life, and vice versa. So we all have different things that we want to, different perspectives that we want to experience. So within our soul group, I know that Krista and we both know that we've had many lives where we've been in love, but I haven't always been male and she hasn't always been female. So we get to choose those things, and we get to choose where we are and what part of the world we live in, and what language we speak, and things like that. And the major experiences that we have that take us on the path that we want, they're all predestined, and then we fill in the rest as we go along. So we then have the idea of free will being here. So my choosing to speak with you is because I've chosen it as a 3D human being, but that's also been predestined in the sense that we may well have had an agreement as spirits to say, at this point we're going to have this conversation. So it sort of all rolls into one. So this idea of free will and choice, it's goes on different levels. Yes, I have a choice here, but those choices are also made from my high self perspective.
I just want to let people know that we get to choose. We get to choose what we learn, and we come here to learn. On the other side, everything is love. There is nothing else. So, in my view and what I've seen, there's no hell, there's no punishment, there's no judgment. So the only thing that happens there is love. We come here to experience everything else. So the reason we're here is to learn, and learning is hard. And some days we just want to give up. I call them my toddler temper tantrum moments, where I'm like, this is too hard. Like, who in their right mind would ever choose this life? But it's not you as a human that's choosing it. So people get confused there. They think, why would a child ever choose to be abused? Why would anyone be choose to be in a massive tragedy or something like that? Your human self doesn't choose. That's chosen before you come here. And we get to choose exactly how we learn and how we experience our lives. And sometimes we sail through it, and other times it is so hard to just get a handle on what's going on in your life at any given moment. I think people need to now focus on what they're learning in that moment. If you're struggling with something that's going on in your life, think or concentrate on, what are you supposed to be learning right now? If it's hard, the lessons must be huge. So if you can identify those lessons, so for me, a lot of the time it's patience. I am not a patient person. That is my theme for this life. And it doesn't mean I'm going to live my life and master patience at all. I'm going to live my life, and I am going to be presented with infinite opportunities to practice patience with myself, with others, with life, with this world. And sometimes I will be very successful, and other times I will feel like I'm failing, because I have to learn or look at all different views of what it means to practice patience. So if you can identify the lessons, identify what you're learning, your higher self and your guides will stop throwing it at you so much. And let me tell you, the year after the stroke, I think 15 months now, so the year after, my guides and my higher self, it was like target practice of crap. They hucked everything at me again, because they said, I need to learn a lifetime worth of lessons in 18 months. And they didn't mince words. It was gonna be super hard, and you're gonna wanna quit, which I did. Multiple times I wanted to quit. And even still, some days are wonderful and I feel great. Other days I'm like, what the hell did I do? Why did I make this choice? And it's still, every day I'm still learning. The people who don't realize or don't think that we're here to learn, unfortunately, usually have much easier lives. But the learning and where we focus that learning is what makes us move forward. So it's not punishment. It's not, God or your guides on the other side saying, oh, ha, here you go, have this, you suck, have fun trying to walk through that. No, it's your guides and God and everyone you love saying, we know you are strong enough to walk through this life. We're going to walk beside you as you learn these lessons. If you ignore the lessons, they'll keep throwing them at you. So try to focus on what the lessons are. That's why we're here. We are here to learn.
And so I see my life, and somebody comes and brings me a sheet of paper, like a piece of paper, but it's different because it had listed maybe 20 things on it, and I had to choose something for my life. I was all preparing for my life to come to Earth, and it shocked me when I came back, and it blew my mind. But on this list, I was supposed to choose something that I had to experience on Earth to learn through. It would be lessons. I had to have some type of physical impairment. I was supposed to learn through this. And so I looked at the first thing, and I sort of picked it up and looked it over on the living book, but I didn't let go. And I saw how it affected my life. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I put it back. I tried another one and held it over the living book, and I saw how it interacted in my life. I said, no, and I went on down. The things at the top were the hardest, most difficult things, and they got easier as you went down. And I went down, and I finally said, let me try this one. And I said, I can handle that. Okay, that one, I'll take that. And then I was shown another list. There was a lot of things for me to choose. And on this list, I had to learn through some type of hardship. And one of the things that I saw most of us, or that was very commonly used, was marriage. I said, well, everybody uses that, I'll try that. Not knowing what it would do, what it would entail. And then through this process, I also had a guide or a mentor beside me. And every time I picked something, he picked something. So it was his turn to pick something, and he also chose my marriage. I said, oh no, I've been given a double dose of marriage problems. I said, oh no, I don't know if I can handle that. I said, well, he must see that I need this experience. So I trusted him, and I swallowed. Okay, I'm going to do it. So, I mean, this is me watching and reliving it. As this is going on, I'm doing it. Is it like in the present? And all the things on Earth vanished away. I didn't even think of what happened or where I was before. So I'm experiencing my guide or mentor choosing things after me. And one of the things that I chose, I didn't want to be blind, but I chose to have poor vision. I actually remember choosing this. Ever since I was in second grade, I wore glasses. And I would have never thought I would choose these things. I would never thought that I would choose to have a difficult marriage, let alone a double dose of marital problems. And it changed my whole perception about life, because before I thought I was a victim. I didn't like my marriage. I wanted to get out. I didn't know what to do with it. I wanted to die because I couldn't stand it anymore. And I said, well, if I'm the one that chose these things, I'm not a victim. I chose it. It changed my whole perspective on life. Now I said, I'm supposed to learn something through this. I can do it. I can be strong. And now I don't blame my husband anymore. There were things that I was supposed to learn through him. There were good lessons. And I also learned through this process that the harder they are, the more it benefits us and others, because we help the people that we interact with on Earth, we're helping them too. And when we're observing someone else having problems on Earth, we feel compassion and empathy for them. But when we're going through it ourselves, we're personally involved, we're stronger in our emotions and the pain. We have to decide it's affecting us. So it's stronger involvement when we choose what we go through. And so all these things just completely changed the way I viewed life. And so I kind of afterwards was then chosen this guide, told me to choose something that would help me in life. And I said, oh, help me, not something difficult, but something that's going to help me. Okay. And so I chose, but I do not remember. It's weird. Some things it's like I'm permitted to remember some things, but not everything. I don't know how that works. But this, the guide chose my husband as something that would be helpful. And I thought, I call them safety bumpers. And I thought, well, how can my husband be a safety bumper when he's supposed to be double dose problems? And I thought, well, it'll make it not be quite so difficult. I said, sure, yeah, let me have something that's going to help me. And then he said, pick another one. I said, well, I already have one. He says, you need another one. So to balance the difficult trials, I also had the positive things to choose. And one of the things that the guide chose for me was my second child. My first child was chosen to be a difficult trial for me to go through, and he still is. But my second child was going to be a blessing to help me stay on my mission, and she is. Everything that happened that I remember choosing, that's my life. That's what happened in my life. Here I wanted to give up on it, not knowing these are things that I chose. And so it just changed everything I thought.
And we realize that there's more than just the physical world. There's a physical world which is created from consciousness to awaken us to our consciousness through the experiences and the questions and insights and perceptions we have through our experience. And that experience is about bringing us home, back to who we are, what we are, where we are, and how we are. Part of that for me is realizing, yes, I have a physical form, but I'm not limited by this physical form. I realized very much that death, as people think of it, doesn't exist. There is no end. We come into this world through this body. It's not the first body I've had, and it's not the last body I'll probably have. I remember when I was coming into this experience, there was an introduction period before I coming into this life, and I was shown what I was going to learn. And it's interesting, we think we're all enlightened there and everything's great and harmonious. Well, I was an impatient little soul, and they were giving me instructions on how to manage this life I was going into. And they gave me some instructions. I thought, oh yeah, I've got this. And I rushed off into the life before I was fully prepared, which is part of where I found this life quite shocking through the experiences that I was having at a younger age. And through learning to tap back into that experience, I've learned the importance of patience. Not rushing through experience and not taking on the think where we get a bit of information and think we know. We don't. We know it when it relates to our experience. And it's only through experience we get the understanding of what that knowledge and guidance is about. So learning to sit with both knowledge and sit with experience patiently until we feel the integration of the two is important. I rushed into this life without understanding the words that I was being shown. And I say shown because when they use words on the other side, it's not just a physical, like a verbal physical hearing. They're using words, but there's once again whole concepts with it. It's an impact of understanding on every level of consciousness. I don't have any other way to describe that. There's no earthly experience I know that's like that. It's words that have both tactile sensation, they can even have taste and smell. They have a vibration, they have a sound, a color, and a frequency. It's involving senses that are beyond the physical senses. They're senses of both awareness and more consciousness. And you've got to be in consciousness to actually understand it. This is where we realize that the brain itself that we're born with is actually a very limited device. We come into the world with a brain that is asleep to that consciousness that we're inherently a part of. And part of being in this world is actually waking up to that consciousness that we are, which is where the earth walk is essentially through the brain, is a sleep state. And we're waking up from that asleep state that the brain is to the consciousness from which we come and are constantly a part of.
I found myself traveling, and I came to a point where I am facing what looked like a large television screen. Now, in the 1960s, television screens were very small. The screen lit up, and once it lit up, it was divided into 3 sections. Section on the left had a heading that says, "The life that I had created." The second column was the way I had lived the 26 years, and the third column at that point was blank. So I'm looking at one column that says, "This is your life as you had planned it." The middle column is, "This is your life as you have lived it for the past 26 years." And the third column is blank. And then the screen begins to scroll. As the screen begins to scroll, now I can see what it is that I planned. And in the middle column now, I'm looking at and revising how I have lived this objective that I set for myself. And then when I turn my eyes to the last column, it said, "Objective not accomplished." And then it scrolled up a bit more. And now I'm out of childhood and I'm more into my teenage days. And again, I can see on the left-hand side the objectives that I had set in my plan and what it is that I should have accomplished during those years. Believe it or not, I don't feel judgmental. There's nobody judging what I'm reviewing. But now I'm amused because I'm thinking, I lived for 26 years. How could I not have known what it is that I had set for myself? And the fact that it seemed that I had lived the complete opposite to what was contained in my life's objective.
I think when we're there, and I can speak from personal experience, when we're in the higher realms, you're so blissed out and everything makes sense to you. You don't feel, there is no suffering. And so, if you're completely in joy and somebody says to you, "Hey, why don't you go do this job?" And you're like, "Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. I would love to go do that. Great, sign me up." And then you get here, but you forget who you are. Now you have no recollection of who you are. You're not feeling that vibration of your heart. You're not in your heart frequency. You're not aligned with your soul. You're back in being a human body with an ego, with this world that is not really conducive to enlightenment in this moment. And you're trying to fulfill this thing that you wanted to do. And it's difficult. And so all suffering ends when you remember who you are. But yes, we do plan our lives. I'd say, and I've experienced quite a bit of trauma in my life, and ascension is always the goal. And it's hard sometimes because sometimes it's the things that are happening around you. You could just say, this is ridiculous. It just keeps coming. And it's just stay in whatever capacity you can, stay connected to your heart. Even if it's just a tiny tether that helps you remember that this is, a finite world. You are love. And this is what I used to tell myself is this is all happening for a reason. I just don't know what it is yet. But when I find out, it's going to be really good. And sure enough, it is.
And instantly, I was put in a theater, an empty theater. All the seats are empty except one, the one that I'm in. It's completely black around me, and I can see the stage up ahead of me, but that's all there is. And then, one by one, people, the director, the producer, the writer of the show, and I came to know, because I saw them all, they were all me. As my story started playing across the stage, I was the main character. And all the other people in my life were the supporting actors, including my mother. And from this, I did come to the knowledge that we had chosen to be in the roles that we had been in. And she had loved me enough to do all those horrible things to me so that I could have the compassion to be able to help the people I help today.
And what kept going through my mind at this point was, oh, of course. I was, if you will, remembering what I had forgotten very intentionally in order to be on this planet, which is what we all do. In point of fact, I don't think that this planet exists. It's a figment of our imagination, if you will, and we have a very good imagination. We're incredibly creative beings. But whether or not it's for real doesn't really matter. The truth of the matter is that we know things when we're not here that we choose to forget while we are here. I make the analogy because I think it works so well. It's like when you're sitting in a chair reading a book that's a really good book that you're really involved in. Somebody could walk in the room and talk to you and you don't know they're there. Your focus of attention is not on the book, the story in the book. And you can get so preoccupied with that, you lose track of everything around you. You just tune all of that out and you focus on one thing. Similarly, you know everything about what your life's going to be like here. From beginning to end, you knew it before you got here, and you will know it again when you leave here. But while you're here, you're focused on it. And you're focused on each given moment in it. And when you leave here, it all comes rushing back and you say, of course, yes. That, and it's also simple. It's very simple.
Do people plan their lives before they come here?
That's a great question. Yes, virtually all of us, a few very low-level souls apparently don't, but virtually all of us carefully plan a lesson, series of lessons for our lives. We do it in conjunction with our guides, with the people who will be in our lives, most of whom we've been in lives with before, and their guides. And we try to plan really tough. The more advanced we are already, with the more tough stuff we plan in. You know, I want all these bad things to happen because I'll just ace them out. I'm going to get on that tough machine. And so the more advanced people usually have to have their life plans reviewed by a council of sixth level beings who will just help them tone it down to something that will not break them. Because obviously it would be good not to have your muscles actually worn out and broken, and people kill themselves sometimes when they can't surmount a tough lesson. But you see bad things happening all the time. When bad things happen in your life, virtually always, you can't say anything 100%, virtually always those are planned by the people having that experience as a way to grow. And that includes the deaths of children. It includes every horrible illnesses and everything nasty. People plan that. And they're glad to plan it. And then they do the best with the lesson.
So why some people choose an easy life? Well, we always think that the grass is greener on the other side, meaning that we think that if people have an easy life, that they don't have any problems that are going to stand in their way. When there are lots of people who are wealthy, who have it all, who are deeply depressed. And so they come into this life, they may have chosen to, let's say in a previous life, they were poor and on the street. And they say, well, I, feel as though I need to come into this life with a lot easier life because my soul needs a break and I think I will be able to appreciate things. They come into that easier life and they have an even harder time appreciating things. So their whole journey might be to learn how to be grateful for the things that they have because they have so much. They also might learn in that journey where their life is easier, because their life is easier, to make it an act of worship to bless other people because they've been blessed with so much as well. So so people go into an easy life and a hard life for the same reasons, for soul refinement. And we never know what the actual journey is going to be like when we go into, when we decide to live those two different lives. But either way, it's an aspect of our journey that we needed. It's a level of instruction that we needed for our life.
The memory I have is that I was in a space. I could not see walls or a ceiling or a floor, or it was this massive space. And there were many other beings of light in that space. Most of them were off in the distance. And I was in the presence of a giant light, and I was in complete joy and bliss in the presence of this light. Or to my left, there was a screen. And this is where we were planning my life, and we could change the course of my life somehow by altering what was on the screen. And it was almost like a movie that you could go in and you could edit and change things, but it was actually changing things in my physical life. So on the screen, I could see the universe, and with all the stars and the planets and the location of the earth, and then we could dive in and zoom in on my life and all the events that were going to happen, and we were tweaking it, and I don't remember any of the details except that I asked for red hair, and we were going through the final planning stages. And at that time, I've received questions about this. I knew all about my life, what it was about, what my purpose was, what I was going to accomplish. All of that has been taken from me now, except for the fact that I asked for red hair. This knowledge that I chose my hair has had such a huge impact all throughout my life, even as a young child. Now, if you were to ask my mom about when I was little, she will tell you that I talked about the light, and I talked about angels, and I talked about memories that I had, and she thought that I was just making them up, but she can confirm to you that this is a real thing. I have a lot of other memories, and not like crystal clear, black and white, this is what I saw, did not happen in a physical realm. They happened somewhere else in some other reality. Without the use of the five senses so much, they're more impressions, something that's real on a deeper level. And I'll be honest, a lot of the memories that I have, I can't describe them even if I wanted to, because I don't understand them. I don't even have a framework to even know how to think about them, let alone understand them myself. But
there is a part of the life plan before you're born that you choose the body that you're in now. And depending on what you're trying to achieve, you'll choose different things. When I had a past life regression, I found myself, it was like I was in a department store, and there are all these bodies in these glass boxes, and sorry, all these bodies in these glass boxes, and you could walk past them and you look at them and you think, no, I don't need that one, I don't need that one. And it's also a question I ask the spirit guide during a session. Sometimes, depends if we need it. It's like, why did you choose this body? There was one woman, the spirit guide said, well, you wanted somebody who wasn't too attractive, but not too ugly. And the woman in the session started laughing. And there was another woman who had terrible stomach problems. And it was from birth. And the spirit guide said, yeah, this was part of your soul plan. You chose to have a body that would have these stomach problems because it's part of your life lesson. So there was a woman who said she was given the opportunity to choose a very beautiful body for this life, but she turned it down because it would not help with the lesson that she needed to learn. So there is a point definitely where you choose the body that you're in now, just like you choose your parents and which country you're born. So when we look at soul groups, it seems to be that there may be a group of 20 or 30 souls that work together. And I kind of think of it as like it's a theatre group, but it's much closer than that. It's like people who have near-death experiences, sometimes they meet their soul group and they talk about this tremendous love amongst them and how they finally feel that they're home. But before you're born, you sit down. It sounds strange to say that because it sounds like it's an earth thing, like you're sitting down around a conference table and you get a script out and you say, okay, this person's going to be your mother in the next life, this person's going to be your father, These two people will be your brothers. The lesson you're working on is rejection. So what we're going to do is these three souls, you will marry all three of them, and all three of them will reject you in some way. And that will help you learn the lesson of rejection. But then you're going to have this terrible relationship with your father because your father wants to learn about the relationships with children. And so it gets more and more complicated. And it's almost like it's a theatre group and you're all actors and you're working on this new play and you've got your scripts and you have to work out how it's all going to come together. And so you have this life plan that you work out with your soul family. And it seems to be that you have life after life after life, you all work together. And it may be that sometimes you work with all of them, sometimes you may work with one or two of them. And it may be that you have a twin flame in your soul group or your soulmate is in your soul group. But the way I think of looking at your soulmate or your twin flame is that it's not a romantic thing. Like it can be, but you might find your soulmate in this life is your brother or sister. Or it might be just somebody you meet for a couple of years and you have some crazy relationship and then they're off. It's not like you marry when you're young and then you're together your whole lives. It just depends how it works out. And so with the soul family, there could be all sorts of relationships and they can come and go in your lives and you all work together. But when I say you have a plan for your life, that's not set in stone. There's still free will and you can go off plan. And in some ways, you're letting yourself down and you may be letting down your soul group. But as we're born without the memory, we don't know if we're going off plan. We're just living our lives and doing the best we can. With the soul group, as we can choose our family members, our mother and father, and we can agree on how our relationships will go between each other. And there may be trauma and upset. And it could be a thing in our life that we look back, like maybe 30 years old or 60 years old and think, if reincarnation is real, forget it. I'm not coming back. Life on Earth's too tough. And so that'll be your human viewpoint, but your soulful viewpoint, your soul might be looking at it thinking, oh man, I learned so much in that life. That was great. I'm definitely doing that again.